Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Kate Taylor. I run our startup and small business team here at Notion. For those of you who are new to Notion, we build software for team collaboration. We're used by millions of people all over the world for notes, tasks, and organization. For our mission, we want everyone everywhere to be able to mold software the way that they want to use it. We love working with startups like all of you because you all get this. Startups push the boundaries of what the product can do, and you build tools that you need to run your companies. In my job, I get to see it firsthand, and it's honestly inspirational. So thank you. We are appreciative of all of you being here today. We're here to talk about product-led growth. A lot of folks think of Notion as the quintessential tool for this, and it's become a big ambition among startups today. PLG, or product-led growth, refers to products that are designed to help drive growth that users can self-serve and find enough value in. They share it and they bring it to work, and thus it expands. It sounds great, right? But it's not as straightforward as it might sound. If you take it from us, product-led growth is really dependent on community sometimes more than product, as an example. The goal of today is to talk about some of the shortcuts and secrets from our experience, and we're going to unpack the tactics through that today. And we have two guests who are going to help decode that. They've operated on the front lines of product-led growth, and they've seen how it works up close. So first, we have Madhu Muthukumar. He's Notion's head of product. He's seen it firsthand at Robinhood, Oculus, and Twitter, all companies focused on products that would grow virally. And next, we have Caryn Marooney. She's general partner at Coatue, lead investor in Notion. She works with many of the most respected PLG companies and brands, including Figma and Airtable. And before Coatue, Caryn ran communications at Facebook for over 8 years. And she's one of the industry's most experts on sharing company stories. So both are here today to share what they've seen. So thank you, Caryn and Madhu, for joining us today. And we're excited to get started. So we'll do a quick warm-up question for both of you. It would love to hear more about a PLG company right now that you're excited about that's not Notion, and tell us a little bit about what's so interesting about that particular company. And I'll let kind of Caryn, maybe you can kick us off.
Yeah. And you said not Notion. So, okay. Notion. And then not Notion is Calendly. So one of the things, I suggest, I love it personally. It helps you keep your calendar, which sounds like a very, very simple thing. But one of the reasons I love it is it makes scheduling even easier than if you were to have a person helping you schedule. So it takes something and it has an incredibly beautiful, simple user interface, and it does a lot of very complicated things behind the scenes. And it's very viral. So once you've booked a meeting once through Calendly, you see its magic. So I'm a big personal fan of Calendly.
Love it.
Yeah, me too. I like Calendly a lot. I just started using it a couple weeks ago for the first time. I'll pick something different. I can't pick Notion, so I'll pick the other tool that I have open almost at all times, which is Figma. I think Figma's story is a little bit different because they just so clearly understand who they're building for, and they've generated a community of people who feel like they're part of the product building and part of the experience. And then they're just in this beautiful flywheel with them where they ship features. They know that those features are going to resonate. If you're a designer in this room, or if you're a company that's building, UI, Figma just sort of gets the people on your team who are putting together everything from drawings, wireframes, copy, and it's little touches that reinforce that community, which then has them go out and tell everyone else, hey, you need to go and use Figma. I remember the first time that I saw Figma, it was, this is going to date me a little bit, but like the new hot software was Sketch, and everyone was talking about how to make all these tools and boards and templates in Sketch. And really it got displaced entirely because one or two designers inside the company just said, hey, I know this tool might not be as good, but they get it. And I just think that they've done a fantastic job. If you look at their track record of the last year, 2 years, it's absolutely admirable. They've just gotten so much done with integrations, FigJam, big fan.
Awesome. Two great companies. Maybe Madhu, just like kind of building on that, tell us about PLG. Like, do you think this is a legitimate strategy? Is this real based on like what you've seen out there and kind of what Notion's trying to do? To like tell us a little bit more about your thoughts about PLG more broadly.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic because, as you said in the intro, like a lot of my career has been spent in consumer products, and I've been a customer of a lot of these new wave PLG companies. And so in many ways, even the term PLG to me is just the same as the term growth. This is what we did at Robinhood. This is what we did at Oculus. This is how Twitter grew. And that's a change for the B2B SaaS world. I think there was a world in the past where you had to come into organizations a very specific way. And today, we're seeing a different way. So I don't think it's a fad at all. I think it's actually just adding another way of growing to an industry that previously had one model. And so if you look at the internet, which allows for scale, and you look at the largest products in the world, places like Caryn's worked, Facebook, or TikTok, these folks have just figured this motion, this process out, which is how do you find people? How do you compel them to use your product? How do you get them to talk about your product and tell their friends? PLG is just, hey, how do you do that inside of a workplace? And there are different constraints for sure. But it's one of the reasons I'm excited about being at Notion, and it's certainly something that's here to stay. I don't see any change here.
Yeah, Caryn, what are your thoughts on that?
So one, I personally believe product-led growth is real and here to stay. My word of warning is anything that gets popular becomes a buzzword.
Yeah.
So you see people throwing it out, and you'll hear like organic growth and word of mouth and PLG, and there'll be other initials, and you have to still take a step back and realize the value that you deliver and to who. Mahood said something really important. Figma understood developers were its first audience, delivered incredible value, and created a flywheel of value community product. So the real essence is still value community product. And if you don't understand who you're providing value to, and then continuously close that of showing the value in change and iterating, you've really sort of missed a lot of it. So I think it's real. I think it's important. I do think that people also say, if we build the product, it will take care of itself. Not the case. And you have a lot more that you need to do around the product in order to have its full potential. And I know we'll go more into that, but I just want to say, you just can't just put it out there in the world and be like, okay, PLG.
Yeah, just jamming on that for a second, Caryn, I think that's also a misconception of consumer. That's why I'm saying, I'm not confident that the buzzword PLG is so special. If you build a consumer product and you just think, hey, I'm going to build it and it's going to take off. Has it ever happened? Sure, it's happened. Do successful companies do that? No. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes that's marketing, positioning, partnerships. Your favorite company that you love the product of, I promise you, they are doing this work under the hood. And so it's no different. And I would just say, yeah, to your point, don't reduce it down to just, hey, we can find a way for people to talk about this. It is an important part of a larger process for you as a company and as a product team.
Caryn, I know you must have seen many successful PLG companies through Coatue. What stands out to you? What do they have in common? Are there any key things that folks here could glean from your experience?
Yeah, I think one is, even if you are building a product that I call horizontal. So there's horizontal products. I think of Notion as being a wonderfully horizontal product because it truly can serve anyone. Or you have a vertical product and you have a very specific. So I think Figma is an example of, you're going to start with designers. So some are horizontal, some are vertical. And even when they're vertical, they're going to expand. And even when they're horizontal, they're going to start with somebody, everybody's a somebody. I think it's important to have in your head who it is, again, early on, your North Star audience that you're going to start with, because it's too difficult to be everything to everybody right off the bat. So that's number one, is really genuinely understand your audience. Number two is that complexity is not your friend. So this idea of you're probably solving an incredibly complex problem, but one of your biggest goals is to hide that complexity almost universally. And I think that really smart people get attracted to complexity, but it's the consumer world has taught us that we don't use instruction manuals anymore, that should be able to pick something up and know how to use it. We've been trained now that you're not expected to have to study. So this is an on-ramp. Good PLG companies have a very safe and almost joyful on-ramp to discovering the complexity. It takes you on a journey of hopeful delight as it delivers more and more and more. So one is audience, two is complexity is not a great thing. And the third one is user interface does really, really matter. I think there was a sense that if you were doing something that wasn't consumer, you could have even an ugly product as long as it did its job. And I think that that's no longer acceptable. And that, again, people are people. Sometimes they're at work, sometimes they're at home. It's the same person, and they would like to have a beautiful experience. And they've been, again, trained to expect that. So my thing is don't not hire designers. Don't think I'll do that later. Don't do that later.
Please hire a designer. Please hire a designer.
Finding that key audience can be hard, like upfront, right? As you start to find product market fit. Madhu, curious if you have any, want to add anything to that. We've been talking a lot about personas internally. So just curious kind of through your experience, that resonates for me and wondering kind of how you think about it.
Yeah, it does. I'll double down on each of those parts that Caryn said, maybe from a slightly different lens. I think, to her point, people are people, right? We're building for a modern human in 2022. You don't get to choose to try to win the 1995 customer anymore. That person's gone. And the second piece of that is the decision maker has changed, right? And so you hear a lot of this in SaaS companies. Who's the decision maker? Who's the buyer persona? Let me give you a consumer lens on this for a second, and why, again, I think these things are so similar. I'm a parent. I have two kids, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And somehow they are getting the products that they want in our house. They are watching Bluey. They are wearing shirts with Spider-Man on them. They're eating the same fruit roll-ups as their friends. They are not the decision maker in the house, or so I think. I might be wrong. And the companies that are doing a good job at getting them those things have realized two things. One is you can meet the kid where the kid is and make sure that they love your product, and they love it so much. My son loves Spider-Man to an extent that is unbelievable, that I, as the decision maker in the home, am just overwhelmed and forced to buy him Spider-Man gear. The other way you can do is you can sell directly to me. And if you look at why we have an iPad in the house, it's not because my son asked for an iPad. It's precisely because they convinced me that this thing could be educational. And I think if you start looking through the world of SaaS or PLG a little bit, not trying to reduce it too much, it's similar. You have two people you can talk to. Get to know them. If you figure out what it is that your end customer wants, like Figma figured out exactly that designers want to collaborate. These are the main problems. Fantastic. Those folks are now influential enough inside an organization to make a change. That doesn't mean the other way doesn't work either. Go and spend your time with the person who's making the decision. And sometimes their need is exactly what you're solving. It could be that they're worried about security in their organization as they go remote. And maybe you're solving that problem for them. And maybe they don't care so much about the design. But to Caryn's point, I think we just live in a new world. Table stakes have been set. The person, by the way, who's a buyer also goes home and uses an iPhone and gets on Instagram. They're no different. And so I do think treat this like a customer problem. Be obsessed with who these people are. If you can empathize with them, if you can tell your team how they think, if you can build in a way that resonates, you're going to be successful. That's going to help you a ton. I'll also double down on one of the things she said. Please hire a designer. Just please do that. Everyone at your company will appreciate working on a product that looks and feels like modern software. No one really wants to be building something that's sort of behind the times. So even if it's not about growth reasons, for your own company, for your own morale, for your own kind of momentum to it, you'll see it'll make everyone feel great.
Building on that a little bit, Madhu, like talking about consumer products that have grown like wildfire. You've obviously worked on many of those. What lessons can the founders in the room and folks here that are, building today, what can they borrow to try to like get that wildfire adoption?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief on this. I think one is just be obsessed with your customer. Be obsessed. It's really hard to be obsessed with 1,000 different kinds of people, but it's pretty easy to be obsessed with 1 or 2 or 3 kinds of people. You can get to know them really, really well. You can start to intuit really strongly what they want. And I mean that in every step of the way. That means, know what media they're consuming, know what words they use, know what products they love, know what problems they have, know what time of day they're going to use your product. I think of it a lot like, hey, can you really imagine writing a sitcom or like a TV show about this person's life? How many holes would you have if you were trying to draw that out? It's a pretty good idea of how well you know your customer. Do you know all the lines they would say? Do you know what they're going to be upset about? Do you know who their friends look like? Do you know where this show is set? Like, it's a good mental model to say, like, how well do you truly know the person that's going to be using your product? I think the second part of this that some companies do really well, and I'm sure we're going to talk about growth and growth hacking, is you have to remember that if you want your customers to create more customers, they have to tell your story. They have to be the ones who can articulate clearly why someone should use this. And I think this is true in every good product. Great products make people feel a certain way about themselves. Instagram makes me feel like a great photographer. I'm not, but it makes me feel that way, right? Like Foursquare made me feel like a world traveler. Fitbit makes me feel like I'm more active than I probably am. Good products tell you a story that you can tell yourself. If you want viral growth, your customers have to tell that story to someone else. And so it sounds silly, but it's true. There's a reason why we focus so much on design at Robinhood. It's because people want to talk about it. They want to share screenshots. They want to show off the pride they have in being an investor. And I think that comes from knowing the person, but it also comes in the quality of what you build. Similar problem at Oculus, actually. When you're building virtual reality, so few people have experienced it that you can't just say, hey, you should try VR. Actually, if you look at most mainstream media, they sort of hate this concept of a dystopian box put against your face. I totally understand why. So your job in that is to make sure that the people who did try it can tell everybody else, hey, this is better than I thought. And that means marketing has to be strong. Positioning has to be strong. The product has to deliver. You have to know who's telling these stories and to what friends. So I would just double down on everything Caryn said. Like, it is really, really important that you get who your customers are. I would just add on top of that, make it easy for them to tell a story. Make it so easy for them to explain what it is you do. You'll get the rest to move.
I'd love to add 2 things. One is, and this is important, you were saying like so deeply know this person, which I love. People, I think also, you fall into this habit and you say, okay, we're building community. So I'm going to do a Slack channel. I'm going to do a lot of events. I'm going to do asynchronous. I'm going to do, and you have a cookie cutter set of things you're supposed to do for community, for product-led growth. And if your audience are very busy B2B people, they're not hanging out in forums, just ripping it. Like they have no time, and they probably have 2 kids who have a fetish about Spider-Man, and they really they are not going to go just chat for a while. So you have to be able to be flexible enough to have multiple channels and meet them where they are. And some of it might be old school email. Some of it might be like, actually, don't bother me, except give me the one thing that I want. Others are like, I want to talk about it. Some people are like, I do not want to talk about it. So it is truly not a one size fits all. And I would say don't fall into that trap. That's what. The second thing is something that we talked a lot about at Instagram, was know the job that your product is supposed to do. And really answer that question. Like, what is the job that your product has? And there was this one story about, it's very American, so forgive me, a fast food restaurant. And people would come, because we Americans, we eat and drive in our cars. kind of gross. So you go through a drive-through and you get a shake, and they were selling a lot of these shakes. So this fast food restaurant had more desserts. They just put a lot more desserts on their menu because they were like, people like sweet things. That's the problem we're solving. And it turned out it had nothing to do with desserts. It was because people got it on their way for a long commute, and they liked being able to like have the straw for a long time. So it was like what they needed to do is make thicker shakes, not make apple pie. And so they really missed what their job was and what the problem was that they were solving. So it's important to like you can fool yourself into thinking that you're solving a problem when you're solving another problem. So deeply look into what that is.
Building on that, we talked a little bit about meeting people where they are. So there's the product side, but also just want to talk a little bit about go-to-market and like how that fits into product-led growth. We want to reach more users and customers. Like how do we think about the go-to-market motion in product-led growth? And maybe either one of you can take this one to start, because I'm be interested to hear both of your perspectives on it.
I mean, I'll go really shortly because I don't have as much experience here as Caryn does, but I would just say, it's important. Organic growth in consumer is nice, but it's not the only thing. Companies work really hard behind the scenes. Boz would hate it if I said this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm going to paraphrase him a little bit because I don't know this group super well. But you have to remember that people aren't just like sitting around bored all day looking for the next product in their life. That's not real. Most people are pretty happy with what they have and generically are not going to put in effort to switch, even if you show them something slightly better. Boz usually says that a bit more directly. But I think that's true. And so like, yes, it's true. You can have viral growth. Your friends can do stuff, but you have to be, working on channel partnerships and performance and marketing campaigns and doing comms, and like all of these are very, very, very real. So like, don't shortchange any of the other parts. We could be having this conversation about performance marketing, and that's also extremely important in knowing who your customer is and where they go. So yeah, my only take here is this is not substitutive. This is additive. There's a go-to-market motion that you guys probably know about that companies are good at. Great, do that. Please do that. This is a new way of sort of building and getting out to folks. Do this too.
Yeah, it's true. It's not if you build it, they will come. Even, all of us, we had something before we had an iPhone, and it had to be, that much better in order for us to say like, oh my gosh, and then you see somebody else using it and it had some other thing that you were doing. I wrote a post, again, very American, I apologize, called The Hamburger Go-to-Market. And the thought was that your product is the meat and the bottom up is the bottom bun, but there is still a top bun. And all of the surrounding things, there's a lot of things you still need to do. And even the best product-led growth companies in the world at some point need some top-down sales. And so it's important to just have an understanding of the trade-offs, because in life, everything has a trade-off, everything. So as a founder, you will be facing trade-offs time and time and time again, because if you put a product feature that's specific to make your product-led growth better, you're probably taking out friction. You're probably making onboarding better. You're probably getting more non-paying users. That's traditional. If you're then going to work on features that are going to help your top down, you're getting feature rich. You may be trying to understand what different pricing structures you have. You're going to have different integrations. So I don't want to just be saying you have to do all things all the time. It's more, be aware that at some point you will have to do versions of both, and that you will have to make some very hard trade-offs. And the post has more, so feel free to check it out.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And I know that's relevant for everyone in this group as you're weighing out kind of like, what's your next hire? Like, how do you balance that? Want to dive a little bit into community, and Caryn, get your perspective on it. We've seen this like outsized impact at Notion, and it's been core to like how our product has grown. Have you seen this across other companies in the portfolio? Like, is this a new trend that's picking up? Like, how are you seeing this?
I do. I think that it's incredibly important. And, I want to just say that it is because of having this sense of honoring your customer and your user in an entirely new way. So it is a mutual respect, and that needs to happen. So if someone decides to talk about your product or share something on social about your product, it is not just because they want to help you. It is, you have to have this thing of what are you doing to help them? And so again, really understanding what is somebody else getting out of this truly, truly, truly matters. And I'm seeing more and more people, companies who are getting this right. And again, it can be a unique set of users who care about one thing can be highly engaged in your product or service. And that's okay. But I want to say something that I think is important is when you have a community, that means they talk about the good and the bad. I mean, it's the whole thing. So that means you need to be part of your own community, and you have to be responsive and engaged. You don't outsource it, and you don't think about it like a side project, because they have their own point of view, and you need to be quite respectful. And when I see companies get it wrong, they don't put enough time and energy into it, because a community is not always positive. And so they need to be listened to and responded to and honored.
Yeah, that's fair. Madhu, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just say, like, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but like when I first started hacking on things, the predominant way that you expanded on the internet was like banner ads. Like you just buy ads, and targeting didn't really exist. And then over time we've seen a number of kind of new innovations, whether that's targeted ads, video ads, social media, SEO, partnerships. You can kind of name the companies that have gotten good at each one of those phases of the world. And to Caryn's point, once it starts working, it becomes really competitive. It's like, hey, someone saw that SEO works. It worked really well for Thumbtack or Pinterest, and now all of a sudden everyone is doing SEO, and actually it becomes much harder again to grow. And so then you see the next wave pop up. And I think what's happening now, because the decision makers have changed in businesses to the point where regular employees can help influence a decision, all of those same vectors are going to open up. And so once you start seeing this, you can realize that, community is the same thing that exists for consumer products. There's a bunch of people who talk about, whatever product that they're using. And that could be everything from, ketchup to a car to a restaurant you go to. There's no difference because of now who the decision maker is. And so community is super important. And I think the bar is set really high, right? The bar is set by the consumer companies or the folks that you're used to who are maintaining real communities. And so you have to meet that bar now. You don't have a choice. You can't really say like, I'm just going to put a little bit of time into it. It'll come off as inauthentic. It'll just kind of fail. And I think, by the way, this is going to continue. Look at influencers and influencer marketing, which you're starting to see companies really do a great job at, or go forward into content and just building true, engaging content. I think you're just going to keep seeing these worlds be the same going forward. And just because you're a SaaS company, you don't get any discount. Sorry, you're competing with the standards that exist in 2022. And so if you're making content, guess what? It better be as good as all the other content I see. And if you're building a community, it better be as good as every other community I want to be a part of.
And this is again, and now I'm dating myself. There was a time where movie studios used to be able to put out a movie and they could bank on opening weekend being very big, because it took a while for the reviews to be written in the newspapers and people to read. So if you did the right kind of advertising, you could have a good opening weekend of a movie, because there was no word of mouth strong enough in the olden days to tell you whether or not the movie was good. And then the internet came, and everybody knew instantly, like, it's long, it's boring, it's fabulous, it's great. And it didn't matter as much what kind of poster you had or what your TV commercial was, because everybody would talk about it right after it was out. And I heard that the movie studios were sad that they lost their opening weekend that they could always count on. And it was because like, no, people found a way to tell each other if it's any good. So traditional wouldn't work anymore. And it's the same. SaaS software companies used to have this thing where you had to install it and get it going. And it took months or years before somebody figured out if it worked or not. And it's the same kind of idea.
Yeah, I'll add one other thing that's interesting here, which is this is why the last topic and this topic matter so much, which is like, yes, picking your ideal customer matters because you'll grow faster. We all agree with that. I'm not saying that's, shocking news. What happens if you pick wrong? It's not just, oh, you picked wrong, you're like wasting some time. You might end up building a community of people you can never please or that you didn't intend to please in the first place. And now you have this, obligation. And by the way, if you're not doing what they want, they're going to let you know, and then they're going to tell their friends. Like, these cycles go in both directions. You can have people go and tell everyone, hey, this product is so amazing. You can also have negative, viral effects where everyone goes and says, I would never use that. That's going to make me not want to join your company or not want to make me, work on any other product. So it's just critical. It all comes down to just customers to tell other customers, make it easy, pick the right people, pick the right story.
And I think that goes back, it goes to expectation setting. So what's sort of, it sounds like they're opposite, but it's nuanced. Every company has a big vision, right? There's something big that you want to change in the world. That's a reason you're starting this company. You have woken up and in the morning and you are going to do this one thing that's quite big and you're going to do it better than anybody else in the world. But as a startup, you don't get to change the world today. You have to start here and explain to people like, here's what we're going to do. It's huge, it's important, it's big. Here's what we're doing today. And the hard part as a startup is you have to do both of these things and you have to make them relevant because everybody's like, why should I care? Who are you? What? So, but if you don't have this match expectations, you just lost them. Because if I come to you and I expect some kind of experience or product and I don't get it, I'm out. And so it is a matching of expectations while still telling a larger vision.
Yeah, don't overpromise. I think that's super important. And that's the same thing as getting the customer wrong. You're making promises that you don't want to follow up on. Like, everyone says this all the time and it's, just, you hear it too much, but you can never hear it enough is also true. Like, look at your favorite companies and how they started. And for most of them, they were exceptionally focused on an audience that is much, much smaller than what they are today. I was just reading the story of Discord and how they started as a Dungeons and Dragons fan group on Reddit. Think about what Discord is doing now as like a gamer, forum, as the backbone for DAOs and crypto, communities. Like, just think of how large they've become. Even they started with an extremely focused case of like, hey, can we get people who are interested in Dungeons and Dragons to talk to each other day to day? There's nothing wrong with being focused. Caryn, cover your ears. I know VCs sort of.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay, and they generally will ask you like, well, what's the market? What's the market? Yeah, have a big vision, that's fine. But you got to nail something in front of you and you got to make those people super happy. And yes, there are steps to get from Dungeons and Dragons to virtually every crypto organization now. There are steps to get from personal productivity up to every company. You don't skip it. Don't skip the steps.
No, you have to earn the right. I always say that I think of it like a video game. Each level has a challenge. You start at one level and every level that you get to has a new and different challenge, but you'll never reach a level in a video game that has no challenges. Like, that doesn't happen. So each one of these is its own different adventure. But you have to like earn the right to get to the next level.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And talking a little bit about the product side, Madhu, curious, like, on what from the product side can you actually control to unlock this like viral growth? We have said the community piece, but like, what can you as like a product manager, what can you control? Any like plays that come to mind or things that you've seen firsthand?
Yeah, be be natural is what I often say. Like, know who your customer is, know what their kind of path is, and then introduce growth into that kind of day-to-day journey. I think it's too easy to look at other companies and say, oh, Robinhood has a great referral program, I should build a referral program. Or, Superhuman has the thing that they put at the end of the emails, I should force all of my customers to staple my brand to the work that they're doing. It's not that easy. It truly isn't. You need to really understand who the customer is and when's the natural time to put in that growth. And you can look at it in a lot of places. It could be the most natural time is right at the beginning when they sign up to let everyone know. It could, like Slack, for instance, doesn't work unless there's other people. So you probably need to drive your growth up top. And then there's others that are very, very different where, you might want them to experience the product for a while. And then once they see their first dollar of revenue, or once they see their first happy customer, is a good time for you to ask for them to spread the word. So, don't paint with a broad brush, understand, your product and where it fits in people's daily life, but then, be clever, be smart about when's the right time to ask this person, to go forward. I often worry that if you get too consumery, there is another issue, which is that on the consumer side, in some ways, the network effects aren't quite as strong. You can sort of, I don't have a better way of phrasing this, but you can sort of burn a customer and the impact is lowish. You care a lot about your customers, but if they have a bad experience, the odds that they go and tell everyone else is there, but low. In a business setting, not the case. Not the case. If your brand does something offbeat, low trust, low security, hacky, something that makes this person look poor in a professional setting, let me tell you, you're getting no second shots. It's not going to happen. And so while you hear a lot of growth hacking on the consumer side, and it's very like, hey, how do I get this thing into the world? How do I do X, Y, and Z? And we've seen some dicey things on privacy. Please don't do that. Modern customers don't like it. I think it's even less forgiving on the business and SaaS side. So, be smart, take your shots. Doesn't mean don't be creative. Be creative, find good ways of figuring it out. Be careful with your brand, be careful with your trust. At the end of the day, it's all you have.
When kind of figuring out where to go, like what, in your mind, what's the role that data plays in that? And like, how do you set that up? Or is that an important thing to set up kind of early days as you're building the product?
Yeah, literally my favorite topic. So full disclosure, I have a math degree. So take this all with whatever caveats you want. I think data and research and customer feedback are the same thing. They're just the same thing to me. They're a way of understanding the world around you. And to be philosophical for a second, if you look at human civilization progress, we have made leaps and bounds since sort of discovering the scientific method. So at some point during, the last 400, 500 years, 800 if you go all the way back, we've kind of figured out that if we take some similar steps in a row, we can lead to predictable outcomes. And those steps, by and large, are some amount of observing the world, some amount of building a mental model or hypothesis, some amount of putting something into the world and predicting what will happen based off of that model, and then validating it. And I think as a startup, far too many people are obsessed with A/B testing. Far too many people are obsessed with how do I know the answer? That's not going to happen in most cases. What is going to happen are those steps. You observe the world around you, and you should do that with data. You should do that with research. You should do that with customer feedback. You should do that with your own life experiences. You build a model of what you think is going to happen. All of you are builders. I'm confident you have this model. You put it out into the world, and then you have to validate it honestly. You have to see if it's working. The hardest thing to do is tell yourself the truth. All these dreams and hopes that I had, all this mental model that I have, is it real or is it not real? And data is a critical part of that. You can do it with research, and there are huge benefits to talking with humans, hearing their tone, hearing their inflection, getting qualitative. And there are also huge valuable parts of data, which is you just will cover more space, you'll uncover more questions, you'll be empirical. So to me, this is non-negotiable. Like, companies who are not using data are just tying a hand behind their back. I am not saying you should use data to make every decision. Please don't believe that. Everything in life is a trade-off. Everything in life is probabilistic. I have a probability that I will go home later tonight and have a good dinner, and I have a probability that tomorrow we will build a good product. That's just the reality of the world. You want to understand those. So I'm not saying be obsessive. I'm not even saying log everything, but have a culture that says we measure the things that matter. Those things that matter are the things that will tell you what your intuition is. Is it right? Is it wrong? And are you going in the right direction? But be committed to that. There's no way around it.
That really resonates. And I know, especially for Notion, as we've been building early days, listening to users and weaving data into that story has been really, really crucial. Caryn, kind of question for you on the like Coatue side, as you put your hat on and you look at so many of these startups who are making early moves, any ones that you've observed are really marked or like really important that you want to pass on to this group? You know, as most of them are starting to get off the ground, like what are some critical things that you think they need to do in order to be successful?
I think that a lot of it goes back to some of what we've talked about, but I want to just restate that being a founder is really hard. It's incredibly exciting and it's incredibly difficult. You're out there in the world building something that nobody has done before, and you have either a different way of doing it or a different reason for doing it or a different view on how it should be. So then the steps of then building it are incredible and probably your life's work, which is really, 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 really exciting. From the sense, and being that I've worked inside of a company for so long, now that I'm on the other side where we look at early stage companies and are trying to help them like grow and understand and help them be super successful, you do want to get a sense of this is a company that truly understands the one or two things that it can be and do fundamentally different or better than anybody else. Just fundamentally has to be some like arc of a change of why this is a better solution. Either it's a better approach, either it's because it's more modern, or it is because we have a new industry. So like climate is a big one right now, where there is so much happening in climate tech. There's so much happening in fintech because a lot of things have just unlocked. One of the things with Notion was that it had taken something that had happened before, and yet it was entirely new. And the experience itself was so good that you could just imagine that other people would want to have this experience too. Because again, we went back to like, I'm a VC, but I'm a person, you know, I'm both. Like I have a kid. And so you have like people are people are people are people. So it's a sense of, the term is product market fit. Has the product yet shown that it understands who its end user is? And has the team shown that it can build and continue to iterate and be innovative on this product? Another like thing that people don't think about is the best companies in the world hire the best people. So you as a founder are going to spend way more time recruiting than you had ever. Like nobody starts a company and says, I'm going to start this company and then spend a third of my time recruiting people. Said no one ever. But the reality is what also the VCs are evaluating is, are people going to go work for you? Is a question we have to ask, because if you're going to build a company, people need to want to follow you. That doesn't mean you need to be a certain personality type at all. There's no like cookie cutter on what type of founder you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be yourself, period. And learning and growing and having people want to follow you. So I would say the sense of like product, understanding the company, and is this person able to have people want to work with them, and are they going to be able to iterate and innovate on this for the long haul? And some of the things I personally look for.
Yeah, curious on like from what you've seen then from those early founders who are recruiting people in, like who are some of those first hires that are important for them to have, or ones that I guess it probably depends company to company and what they're trying to pursue, but like anything notable of like those first few that stick out to you?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you some of the big mistakes that founders make when they go to make some of these hires is a founder will, say like, oh, I'm really good at sales and marketing, or so I'm going to hire somebody who's really good at the things I'm not really good at, or I'm an engineer, so I'm going to hire this. So founders look for people who have some opposite skill sets, which I think is really great. But with that, sometimes they take people they don't like, because they think that an opposite skill set also means like, yeah, I don't really like them and I don't really understand it, but this is the thing I'm supposed to do because I need the opposite of me. And the reality is, no, you want an opposite. You want skill sets that you don't have, but you got to be able to talk. So let me just say, like, you as a founder, you got to be able to learn, grow, understand. And you're going to have to talk to a range of different people and learn a lot of stuff, but don't hire people you don't want to talk to. It's not going to work. The other thing is, even you who's great at engineering or great at sales or great at product, you're going to have to understand all the elements of the business. So you can't even totally outsource finance or advertising if you have it, or sales if you like. You're going to have to like know enough to understand that the people are doing the right job and they really respect them and have meaningful conversations. So it's a really great job. It's really hard.
Well, thanks. That was great. We are kind of getting close to the end here, and I want to open it up to some live questions. We've had some great ones come in. Transparently, we won't have enough time to get to all of them. I'll bring us back kind of to wrap up a couple minutes before, but I'm going to go into kind of the question app and get to some. Madhu, the first one I think I'll ask of you. The question is, can you tell us how in the US consumer companies turn consumer ideas and behaviors into business ideas? Can you share some methodology and pros and cons here?
Sure. I can't speak to all companies in the US. I'll tell you about the ones that I've been a part of. And I think, there's sort of a meme in Silicon Valley about this, and certainly in the US. But I think at the end of the day, monetization is important, but it comes secondarily. You can only monetize if you have something that has value, right? You're asking for money from somebody in the value chain. So every place I've worked sounds like a cliche. It's not. Get to know your customers, provide them really great value, and then ask for money in return, either from them or from someone else. And so, there's some companies I think can start with a business-focused lens. I think Amazon is a great example of a company that can kind of dream a business forward and go and execute it. And, they've shown that there's a way to do that. I think there's companies that are very design-led in doing this. You can look at Apple or Airbnb, who sort of imagine a world maybe even before they imagine the business. And then you can see people who are very driven by the customer, very driven by innovation. Hey, we can build something that's magical because of our technology or because of our understanding of this space. Oculus is a good example of just imagining VR, and Palmer doing such a good job early days. There's no right way in my mind. The only thing I would say is, know who you're building for, and then make sure you're asking for a reasonable amount of value in that process. And maybe, I'm a little bit biased towards saying, I haven't seen too many products where people really, 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 really love it, and a lot of people really, really love it, that haven't been able to create, a business off the back of it.
Yeah, thanks for that. Caryn, the next one I'll ask of you, this one was, how do you prevent yourself from building a too specific product and lock yourself into a small customer hub?
Yeah. So I think if you look at it, again, there's the horizontal platforms and the vertical platforms, but even on the vertical, I worked with Mark Benioff at Salesforce for 13 years. And he always had this vision, the end of software, and that he was going to be the leader in cloud. So it was a bigger vision, end of software, leader in cloud. Start with sales teams, start with Salesforce, and then you're going to build onto that. You have that vision, but if you don't nail this first one, you don't earn the right to go on and do Marketing Force and all of the other ones, or even having the ecosystem that you have. So I think that ties into, you have to have some passion for the problem that you're trying to solve for that first customer, so that you don't want to lock yourself into too narrow. So again, think about, is this an interesting enough for you personally, because you're going to work on this every day, segment for you to address? And do you have some way of understanding and knowing them better than anybody else? And if it feels too small to you, it's probably too small, unless there's some adjacency that makes it like a collective type of person. And I think even those, when you say, small, they all have a larger thing. It's almost all starting in this way. Again, almost every climate tech company is trying to do something around saving the planet, and then they're going to take a slice of like, here's our starting point. And I think of almost all these as the starting point.
Yeah, I want to add to this, which is I like questions like this, and I like painting the other guardrail. Of 100 companies that I talk to that are small, startups, mid-sized, the problem for 99 of them is that they're going too broad, not that they're going too small. So like, yes, I hear you, like, oh, I'm too small of a space, I'm going to get locked in. First of all, the odds are low that you're in that position in the first place. It's very difficult to be focused in your role to get to the point where you like literally are only serving one problem. Assuming you're in that spot, I also think there's a pretty good way out. I'm going to plug a blog post that I think is fantastic from Bengali Kaba. He ran growth at Instagram. He's currently at Pop Shop Live. And I hadn't seen this method of thinking before, but I really liked it. It's called adjacent user theory. You can look up the blog, or we'll find a way to get you the link. But his point is, anytime you build a product that people like for a core customer group, there's a bunch of people who also try to use it for something else who fall out of your funnel. Right? So there's a bunch of people who are going to try to use Notion to be a vacation planner, and it's just not really working for them, and they're going to churn out. As soon as you want to start opening up to the next audiences, like, hey, I have this one audience, it's going really well, we understand them, they love us, it's actually worth asking yourself the question, which is, what are other people trying to use this for? There's like a famous story of Foursquare in Turkey being used as a dating app, even though they didn't intend it to be a dating app. And I think it's stuff like that that can also start to open you up. So again, it's unlikely you are too focused. Very unlikely. I just want to say that like as many times as I can. If you find yourself in this strange predicament where you're only serving rural dentists in, you know, the south of France who need deliveries, fine. Look at the 5 people who tried to use your product and failed out of it, and figure out what that next adjacent market's going to be.
Madhu, we'll keep with you on this last one. Can you give us some good examples of structure or process in a company to make sure they understand a customer very well?
Yes, it's a team sport. Vlad used to say this, and Beju actually used to say this even more at Robinhood, which is, there's one thing that everybody in your company has in common. One, and probably only one. It's the customer you serve. And it doesn't matter if you're on the finance team and you're trying to figure out how to build the company to serve them. It doesn't matter if you're on the people team. It doesn't matter if you're on engineering. It doesn't matter if you're in sales. Everybody has one thing in common, which is you want that person to be happy. So it's got to be a team sport, which means there's no one process. There's 100 processes. Talk about it in your company, all hands. Bring various functions to research. Share out, do lunch and learns, create posters, send stuff on Slack. Hey, we talked to this person. Build, rebuild, bring those people in, hear their voices. By the way, I feel the same way about data. I said to you earlier, data and research are the same. This should be the same. Everyone should have access to a dashboard. Everyone should see charts. Why? Because ideally, you've hired great people who are smart, who have a unique perspective. And when they look at that material, they're going to do 2 things: internalize it and do their jobs just a little different. And then they're going to ask you really great questions. It has to be a team sport. You want every person asking over and over and over, hey, what about? And I promise you, if your recruiter knows the end customer as well as your designer does, you're going to hire fantastic people. If your finance person knows it, you're going to take the right risks. It's worth it. Every process you run as a company.
Yeah, I have one example of that, and then one suggested framework. I went and met with the management team at Pixar years ago, and Pixar is a movie studio. They make, Toy Story and Ratatouille and beautiful movies. And they have this saying inside Pixar. It's like, you can draw a beautiful fish. Like, you can be one of the best animators on the planet. You can be one of the best marketers in the world. And you can be one of the best receptionists. But if the movie isn't good, none of it matters. And so all of you are serving one thing. The movie has to be good, because then people will love your fish and look at your poster and call you on the phone to answer it. So they're so single-minded, and which means all the ego goes away and everything else, because if the movie isn't good, none of it, so it falls away. Best accounting firm in the world, doesn't matter if the movie isn't good. So they have a really good process of bringing that back in each department to say you are all serving a higher goal, and we're going to help you understand what that is time and time and time again.
I was just going to add to this really quickly, Caryn, which is I often find that the conversations I like hearing the most are the things where you hear juicy details of things that failed. So I want to just chime a quick one in that failed. By the way, failure normal, no problem.
Failure normal, expected, happens.
When we were at Oculus, we wanted to build headsets that would be the mainstream for VR. And as part of that, we wanted to hire the best people in the world. And we found a lot of people from Apple because we just thought the world of their hardware and what they were able to do. And after about 9 months, I'm not going to mention names, after about 9 months, we realized we were not able to build the same way that Apple built. But we couldn't figure out why. We had brought in Apple designers, we had brought in Apple engineers, we had brought in Apple supply chain, we had brought in everything. Like we had brought people in who knew it stone cold. So I did a little recon. I started taking people out for dinner and drinks to try to figure out what is going wrong. Are we all just like that dumb that even by hiring Apple people, we couldn't get the outcomes? And to a person, they all said the same thing to me. They were like, you have not yet created the cadence and culture that Apple had, which was that they didn't care what your job was. You could be in software and ship every week. That's not how the company works. The company is focused on hardware releases. The company is focused on this cadence. And if you're in marketing, if you're in sales, if you're in supply chain, if you're in software, if you're in developers, you put away your ego and you make sure that the iPhone launch is absolutely amazing. And that's how the company works, to your point. And we just didn't get that right. We were a software company that was so used to ship. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But if you want to build great things, you have to establish it across all functions. Research is the same way. You have to have everybody rowing in the same way.
And so on that last bit, one framework to consider potentially is also a messaging framework. It's called RIBS messaging framework, and it stands for relevant, inevitable, believable, and simple. So relevant is like, who is it? That's truly understanding your customer, know them. And relevant means not only do you know them, you can answer why they should care. Inevitable means that like your outcome is ultimately going to be the most successful outcome, and it's a better outcome for them. So that's like where you get to paint your picture. Believable is where you have to convince them that you're going to be the one to deliver it. And as a startup, that's super hard. You're going to work on that every day for the next 3 to 5 years. Believable. And then the S in RIBS is simple. And you got to keep it simple, and you got to keep polishing the stone, repeating the prayer. And that is true in your customer interactions and all of that. So it's just one of those guiding things to help remind yourself.
We just have 2 minutes left, 30 seconds each of you. Is there one piece of advice that you would like to share with the audience, PLG related or not? They're hard at work, building their products. Like, what's one kind of thing you want them to take away today?
Caryn, you want to go first? I'll think.
Yes. Every successful company I've been lucky enough to work with that has succeeded feels like this. Up, down, up, down, up, down. Oh, look, we're going up and to the right. Like to the rest of the world, it looks like this. Inside, it feels like this. So failure is a key part of this, and not having things work. You need enough things to work that you can afford the things that don't.
All right, Madhu, hit us.
Yeah, I'll try that. I think mine's sort of similar, which is I think founders are in a really tough spot. You're used to a lot of people telling you no. You're telling you this idea is bad, or we're not going to give you money, or we're not going to build your product. And at the same time, you have to pick which no's are real. So if a customer tells you they don't like a product, you sort of have to be able to distill that. And I think that happens when you're surrounded by low ego, smart people. I think they will help you figure out when the no is real and you need to listen to it and change what you're doing, versus when the no is just another obstacle in the way. And I think that's why the job of founder is so hard, and why it's like probably the single most like overhyped in the outside world and difficult and lonely job on the inside, is that the same things happen, and they could be the indicator of success or they could be the indicator of failure. And at the end of the day, you have to make that call. And so when we talk about listening to customers, I'm not saying listen to what they tell you to build. I'm just saying, ask them what their problems are. And then at the end of the day, it's still your call. Is this a real no? It's really, truly not going to work. Or is this a no that me and my team, we're going to get through this together? So best of luck on that. Keep low ego people around you.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you've learned a bit more about PLG and gotten some tactics from our amazing hosts here. We'd love to encourage everyone to check out our startups program. We want to help you build your companies. Go to notion.so/startups and please apply. Station F has a key. Choose them kind of as you go through the flow, and we'll make sure you get in. Thank you to Station F for hosting us and also helping us build our community in France. It's been amazing to work with you all, and we're excited to continue into this year. Thank you, everyone. We hope you have a great rest of your evening, and happy New Year.
Thank you.